Hello and welcome to another episode of Combat Analysis. Today we're utilizing some second and third person perspectives for deeper insight. Kicking it off with the skirmish on Beb. The opening is pretty uncomplicated as he attempts to hard read the opening feint, tanks the follow-up Axel, and then tries to hard read the second feint as well. This guy makes a strong evasive effort by running away from my stab, but despite my miss, I can still make a lot of space for my teammate by chambering and stopping his attack before it gets too close to anyone else. It's pretty easy for me to grab initiative here. Sadly, the miss leads into a hard read, which fails. I attempt to duck it unsuccessfully and then fall for another feint. This one I actually managed to dodge, and I pull off a similar response on him after. But if we just go back for a second and look at that from a bird point of view, the duck seems to have almost worked out. Of course it's never guaranteed to work, but just improving your chances of evading otherwise free hits by moving is still an improvement. As for the second feint, it looks like the whiff of the follow-up attack had a lot to do with his movement, as he backtracked after the feint, which meant that we were both moving away from each other. I should have realized that neither of these attacks were gonna land, as the greatsword riposte was on its way to flinch the poleaxe, and I could have pulled off a pretty strong counter initiation here. But even after my parry-induced recovery, I did have yet another chance to wind up again, and shouldn't have resorted to the kick. As much as people like to use stam deny ironically as an excuse for team killing, that actually was very detrimental to me here. I only needed one more hit on Nadine to cash in a full stamina replenish, but now I was left with next to nothing instead, going into another 1v2. I was considering a dodge and kick here, but waited too long before committing. The left side counter attack was pretty stupid as well, since it put me right in the middle of them. Anyway, let's move on to the next clip. Onto a sequence on hardpoint. I could have offloaded my teammate better by initiating with a chamber morph instead of staying out of reach here. Here I'm trying to bait and punish chambers on the first two stabs and commit on the third. I lose quite a bit of stam since he keeps his composure. This left side overhead is also pretty optimistic. That was a pretty close call, with the Indian star closing in on me from behind. I just barely managed to avoid the attack. But securing that kill meant a full stamina pull, which allowed for a costly chamber feint to parry. And together we can now push forward to the cap zone. Being at the front, I don't want to turn my back on this guy, so instead I engage him. Then I do a successful switch, but I lose tempo on my overdrag. Here, I take a hit in the back. Regardless, I would not have been able to save the guy that Flicker killed. I didn't have a chance to feint my attack when his riposte started, so the only way I was going to be able to parry that was by landing my hit first. Basically by accelerating as hard as possible, while still being at a parryable angle with respect to his weapon immediately afterwards. So with this chamber I was opting for a target switch. But since he outdragged me and still landed the hit, that attempt was shot down. And afterwards, I did not manage to turn around fast enough to parry the follow-up. While the outlook was pretty good as we moved close to the cap point, Meta scored two very significant kills on the point shortly thereafter, and that snowballed them ahead to our entire team's ultimate demise. Decent counter initiation. Fortunate synchronization of their attacks here, granting me a double parry on just one click. This attack could have been accelerated slightly more though. Sadly, I do not continue the combo afterwards. That would have maintained initiative seamlessly into the next matchup. Instead, I go for the kick, which he managed to avoid very cleanly. I pull off a successful movement gamble here versus the halberd, but it could have easily gone the other way. The movement was neither explicit nor particularly unpredictable, but it worked. I did blunder 2 parries in a row versus the rapier, but thankfully the slashes don't do too much damage. Throughout the entire engagement, the pillar made sure they both stayed within vision, which was very helpful. I don't have too much negative to say about the conclusion of the fight. Obviously, this guy, whose name I don't know how to pronounce, switching targets, helped out a fair bit. I think the weakest part was the opening here and on the movement gamble due to the high risk involved, as well as the 2 parry blunders. Engagement number 4. I do get a chance here to nibble on my ally's match before the Zwei is able to reach me. Unfortunately, I do fall for the chamber feint, and that pretty much makes it impossible for me to prevent the switch onto failure. But here I managed to get a pretty nice switch myself. Thankfully he turns the wrong way after the first stab, and so I can land the other one in his back immediately after, thus restoring the player count equilibrium. I anticipate a close range chamber here, so I wind up a kick but cancel immediately once I suspect it might be out of reach. At this point I can hear that he's low on stun, therefore I just have to avoid getting hit, so I opt for the chamber, and that closes out the fight. We did have a bit of a rocky start, but Dev's hold through the middle section against 2 allowed for me to eventually get the crucial switch. And since my opponent had missed a number of attacks beforehand, and was robbed of the only kill their team managed to harvest, he went into the second half at a significant stamina disadvantage, which made my final duel much less complicated. So now we've arrived at the final clip. This round mainly played out as a duel for me. I got off to a good start with a stab riposte in the head, then overdragged a bit on the chamber. Also parried a bit late here, but since he misses, the fight is still very much in my favor at this point. But then I get hit with a drag and he follows up with a successful movement gamble. Slipped right underneath the swing with the duck. Here I'm going all in on a more feint, but since he chambers the stab instead of the slash, I'm forced into a feint to parry. If I had parried the final drag, I probably would have lived since my allies were like 1 second away from intervening. We did win the round anyway, so in that sense it didn't matter, but it would have been nice to survive, of course. Since I got off to such a good start with a stab in the head, I really should have been able to win that duel. But I lost a lot of momentum after the chamber miss, and dug further down with a more feint. It's not necessarily a bad play, but it is high risk, and this time I did take the L. Thank you for watching this episode of Combat Analysis. If you liked it and want to see more of these, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, I'll see you all on the battlefield instead. Alright, Burkus out.